Where do you feel more comfortable playing to what you've seen Seattle playing in scheme-wise?
Yeah, I think, for me, I pride myself on versatility, but I think, either in the middle, out wide in the left, I think I can do. It's a little bit different than an out-and-out winger, but I think I can bring that to the team. And, you saw guys last year that kind of filled a bunch of different roles for this team, and I think, I'm one of those guys that can come in and play in multiple different spots.
Maybe a tougher year for you in Montreal. What was your reaction when you found out you were coming to Seattle?
I was excited. I had a great experience up there, and I think, it was tough leaving Chicago for sure the year before, and it took me a little bit while to get adjusted, but for me, it's kind of, the reality of this league, and I've understood that. And now, just talking to the guys in Seattle and talking to the players, the staff, coaches, I feel like it'll be a really good fit for me here, and I'm already, super comfortable after just a couple weeks.
Have you watched Nicolas Lodeiro much yet in MLS, and do you have any impressions on him, what it'll be like to play with him?
Yeah, I watched a lot of games this past year, and then also, I've gone back and watched some games on tape just, to get a feel. My whole thing is understanding what guys around me are going to do. And, I'm not super athletic, but I think I can read the game well. And I think if I know, what those other guys are going to be doing and anticipate, I think, I understand, where to play the ball, where to pass the ball. And I think that's something that's really important for me.
There are a lot of youngsters coming into the squad, under 21s.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, that was you with Chicago. What can you teach them? What can you, now that you're a veteran of the league, right?
Yeah, I don't feel that old, even though I'm 25. But, it's just, it's every day. It's not thinking too big picture. It's not jumping from where they are as a player now to all of a sudden being a superstar. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think, that a lot of those guys, just from interacting them the last week or so, I think they're good kids. They're just coming in and working hard and putting their head down. And I think that's the mentality you have to have as a young kid coming in.
What are your first thoughts on Brian Smitzer and the way he coaches?
Yeah, I think, he's going to be honest with you. I think he'll tell it as it is, which I like as a person. I think, it's easy to deal with someone like that when they're being straightforward with you. We haven't done too much. We haven't gotten too much into tactics or anything because preseason, just started today. But just, dealing with him as a person, he cares about you as a person, which is always nice to see. And, he's honest with what he's going to tell you.
You put your last 18 months kind of into a big picture. You've had kind of some crazy trades, and look where you are now in Seattle. Can you kind of put that into perspective?
Yeah, I think, it's, for me, I think, I didn't expect to be on, if you asked me 18 months ago, I didn't expect to be on my third team in 4 years. No, I didn't. I wouldn't have thought that. But, being where I am now versus, the move to Montreal, I think I'm a lot more comfortable already being out here than I was going from Chicago there, which I think, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this new opportunity. And, I think the guys that we have on this team, I think the way we're going to play soccer-wise suits me a lot better than it did last year, for sure.
You kind of just talked about this, but how excited are you to play on a team that stresses going down the wing and going wide, and how can you help in that process?
Yeah, I think, I'm a guy who's preaches patience with the ball, and I think, once we get it down one side, it's how can you get into the middle, stretch them going the other way, how can you stretch them in behind, how can you kind of, play with them throughout the course of 90 minutes so that you can find those little openings and exploit them when they come.
Semester talks about defense, and how are you ready to play defense?
Yeah, I think, that's something I was forced to do last year, more so than my first couple years in the league when I was in Chicago. I think last year, I was, forced to play more defense, and I think this year that's something I'm comfortable with, and hopefully I can kind of combine the two attitudes I had, in the course of the first 2 years versus last year.
At a personal level, you settled in, and how's Seattle?
Yeah, I came out early. I got a place already, so I'm furniture shopping, doing all that, and trying to settle in for my fiance and I. But it's good. I feel everyone that I've dealt with here, both within the club and outside the club, has been super, super helpful, which makes it easy.